Awesome. Welcome back, everyone, to After the Pause, our YouTube podcast. For those of you who may be new, first time listening, this really started out centered around a book that Kate and I wrote, A Place Called Waverly, woo woo, which we'll talk to you about more at the end. But in the book, we have a pause section at the end of each chapter. And the book itself, just to give you a quick um, glimpse of it, is just a book about courage at the end of the day. So what started as talking about the book turned into greater conversations that has opened the door for us to meet a lot of really incredible people. And we've been having so much fun with this. This week, we've got Peggy Green on here with us. Peggy, thanks so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, it's such a gift. I'm going to tell the people a little bit about you, and then you can take it away and tell us more about you. So, just so you guys know, Peggy is a suicide awareness and prevention advocate, a speaker, and an author of two best-selling books. Her writing has been featured in white papers, blogs, and community resources. And as a podcast guest, she's been heard in nearly 100 countries and conducts workshops both virtually and in person with local and international conferences, which is amazing. Peggy's perseverance and resilience has helped her survive the loss of two children. Her first child died by accident in 1991, and her second by suicide in 2018. The magnitude of her losses is immense, but in an open and vulnerable style, Peggy speaks from a place of experience, and her moving stories and analogies are relatable and inspire a unique and fresh perspective on healing and grief. And reading that alone and like just hearing that bit about you gets me so excited to hear from you tonight. I feel like you're just going to be someone who's full of such wisdom and such incredible perspective. So I could go on, but we would love to hear just a little from you. Who are you? What are you up to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And it's one of those introductions that we never expect, that we don't plan. Growing up, we have visions of doing other things, and life has propelled me into this position where I am blessed and able to speak about having experienced the loss of two children. It's something, to join that child loss club is something I never expected. And here I am now and helping others through it. So in 1991, my first born died in a daycare accident. It was just an error in judgment on the daycare provider. And 30 years ago, there wasn't support to get through child loss. It was taboo, and so much taboo that even her dad wouldn't speak about it, wouldn't speak about her. And I finally broke the ice with my other children when I had them, and I was the one that told them about it because I felt that we had this deep, dark secret, this hidden secret, and it lifted that veil from my children and also the group of friends that we had, because they talked about their children. They talked about my child, and they were always, walking on eggshells to make sure they didn't speak about that around my children who had no idea about it. And so it just opened up the opportunities to heal and, even speak about her. And so now fast forward to nearly 30 years later, and my son chose suicide over life. And I've learned so much about suicide, even though I've been exposed to it before with having a niece who took her life. And then my oldest daughters, she had several of her friends take their lives. But until it really hit my own, I didn't educate myself on it. I didn't understand it. And so after my son passed away, there were so many questions with it. And I dove into asking why, and why did this happen, and how did this happen? And, falling into what we call that canyon of why. Why didn't he talk to me? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't he do that? Just all of this. And so I went to Facebook and just started blogging, journaling what was going on in my life. It's like, this is my part of grief, and it's terrible, and it's terrible and terrible. And about month 3 or 4, it wasn't so much as me that noticed it, but my friends that noticed that I had shifted, and I was not only talking about my grief, but I was talking about how I was moving forward and what I was doing. And so they're like, you need to write a book. Well,
Mm.
shoot, I've never written a book. I'm like, I don't have any formal training in writing a book. And I said, okay. And I thought writing a book would be going back in a year and pulling all those Facebook posts off, the pictures, the comments, and saying, boom, my book is done. Well, you have written a book, and that is not the case, right? I
Not
thought
so
it'd be
much.
so easy. um, and so I worked with a group and wrote my first book.
Wow.
And it was so healing because it was really the tools that I had been using to be able to process my grief and what I was getting through. And then several years later, I was developing a program for my church, and that fell through. But when I looked at that again, I was like, now this is my second book.
Wow.
And this one focuses on suicide. So the first one is Life After Child Loss, the Mother's Survival Guide to Cope and Find Joy. And the second one is Survive Your Child's Suicide, How to Move Through Grief to Healing. And that's and why it's more specific to suicide, because I do talk about those whys and how to get through that, and how suicide loss is unique in as such that a person makes that choice to take their life, and then it leaves the survivors, such as myself, standing and going, now what? How do I go? How do I get rid of the guilt and the shame that's associated with it? Like I said, child loss, when my first child passed away, was difficult. It was that elephant in the room. And now I've added suicide child loss to that. So it really doubled it. And so that's what's propelled me into doing this, because now I can bring together my experiences, my healing, combining my health and wellness background and personal training and nutrition and personal development, all that to bring me to writing books and speaking suicide awareness, prevention, and then helping others.
Wow. That is remarkable. Your story is really difficult to say the least, but so powerful the way that God is, or so often how he kind of turns it and uses it for so much good and beauty. I say that and I feel like I feel silly to, or it feels hard to say that even to you because you've walked through so much loss, but it's so beautiful to see how God is using that, using you to walk alongside so many others who are hurting. So I'm curious for you as you've shared a little bit of your journey, how have you seen the Lord in every step of that process and your journey, maybe from the writing and the ministry and the work that you're doing now? How have you seen the Lord in every step of that?
Yeah, and I'll be just to share with you is that this has been a journey for me. It's not like I am where I am now. When my daughter passed away, I believed in God, but I didn't really have a relationship, didn't have a strong faith. And both my mom and my sister did their best to draw me into the folds in the relationship, and that didn't happen. And it was more after my son passed away that that relationship began to deepen and to understand. Even at my son's service, the pastor, as he was, talking about my son, said, well, he felt like there was a lot of people that had hatred against God. And when the pastor said that God was standing next to my son as he was making that decision, because my son had that free will. So that was even just an aha for me to say, yes, my son, I couldn't blame God. My son made that, and God gives us free will. And now that the healing has been huge in being able to do that and have the courage and the resilience to go through that, two children losses. But I also, my mom and my sister and my father all are gone. My sister was gone at 53. And so the healing and to build upon that, I mean, when you look back, or when I look back, it's like, okay, I've had all these experiences because God's prepared me for this ministry and helping others.
Wow.
That's really beautiful. It's so interesting to think about the connection between something like grief and then courage. Those almost don't seem like they would go hand in hand,
Yeah.
but
I'm curious for you, what are some of the fears that you find that people who are dealing with grief tend to walk through? And what are some of the things that you do to help people choose courage?
Yes. And, it's interesting that you bring that up because the second book, Surviving Your Child's Suicide, I have 3 phases of moving through grief to healing. The first phase is acceptance. The second one is understanding and addressing your fear. So the
Hmm.
entire second portion of that is to understand your fear, identify it, and face it. And one of the biggest things is that people share with me is like, I am afraid that my loved one, my child, is going to be forgotten. And we know that that's not going to happen, that their memory still lives. And it's up to that survivor to keep that memory alive for themselves. They can't control the other people. So it's important that they keep that memory alive for them. And they can do that in so many different ways. Um, we have fear of healing, that it's so painful to heal. I want to ignore this. I'm going to shelf it and I'm not going to pay attention to it. But an analogy that I like to bring is when we are healing, it takes some pain. Just think about I recently had a shoulder surgery and I didn't want to go through that because I didn't want the pain of having to go through the surgery itself and the pain of the physical therapy. But at the end of that, I knew that I would be able to move my arm and it would be back to normal. And it's the same thing with the fear of healing, being able to say, okay, I have to walk through this if I want to get on the other side, or else you stay on this side of the fear of healing. Fear of unknown. I mean, we don't know what's on the other side. If you've not been through this before, it's like, how do I make it through it? How do I do this? So fear of judgment. I mentioned that there's the guilt and the shame that come with somebody who takes their life by suicide. So I'm being judged because of what my son has done, or I'm being judged on how I heal, that I've laughed. I'm being judged that I can write books. So those are ways of that fear occurs to us. And then, as silly as it may seem, is that especially with suicide, there is an increased risk if you've been around it of yourself taking your life or others around them. And I think that's part of what happened with my son. He had been exposed to it. He had a cousin, he had other friends, but the fear of losing another one. And so then a mom can become very much a helicopter mom and really want to just protect their children. So those are some ways of types of fears that we can experience. And, it's really one is being able to, if you're spiritual, if you have that faith, is to be able to put your trust in God that He's going to take care of you, and you trust that you know it's necessary to get through that healing. One thing is just even naming it, because sometimes we have this anxiety or we just don't understand what's going on. So being able to say, hey, this is the fear, naming it and calling it out, and then saying, okay, now that I've got a name, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of this fear of judgment, because you know what? It's not important to me what other people think, and really helping the people that I work with to understand that they can make it through this, but it's the way they think and how they respond. So identify it, face it.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good. And as you shared those fears, I'm like, yeah, I absolutely could see like the ways that those could just be kind of crippling, and already in the face of grief. Like there's already so much grief and then the fears that come with it. I'm curious for you, making it just a little bit more personal, like and it could be some of the same fears that you just talked about, but for you personally, what are some of those fears and insecurities you've had to do battle with in your own life? And are there moments you can point back to that were maybe pivot points, or that moment of like, this is so intense, but I need to move forward? Are there moments like that for you in your life?
Definitely some fear. So when I think back about what has happened, and both my dad and sister had some really stressful life events happen. And shortly after that, diagnosed with cancer and then ultimately passing away. And that was a big fear of mine because I'm like, I still have two grown girls I want to live for, I need to live for. And I personally didn't want to come down with cancer or other crippling diseases. And so that was a fear of experiencing the same thing. So I decided I can't let that happen. And so how do I get through that? And how do I protect myself? And that's one of the things that how the book came about, because like this is what I did to start to work on that fear and that anxiety and on my health. And now I'm blessed not only with two grown daughters, but three grandchildren. And so I'm excited about that and being able to look towards the future. And I'm not done. You know, God's not done with me. And then I've got more, and that God has given me all this experience to bring forward and utilize and say, this is how I can help people. Because my perspective is unique. You know, I don't have the formal education in psychology, but I've got life experiences of the multiple losses. But the third phase of my book is about recovery, but it's in physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So that's where I bring together more of those experiences, being a personal trainer, a nutrition consultant, you know, a wellness coach, and then personal development and some psychology training that I've had, but bringing all those together. So that's, you know, important to address those. That's what makes me unique and different.
Yeah.
And bringing the whole body approach to it. So that's how I was able to work through those fears, looking towards the future, what I wanted, and how I could do it.
Yeah. Oh, Christy, I'm gonna sorry, cut you off for a second. I know you're gonna take it, but you've said this a few times, but the way that you're approaching it holistically, like not just focusing on the emotional health or whatever, like I think that our bodies, like our physical well-being, like that has a ton to do with how we process grief, how we move forward, how we live with courage, like spiritual, emotional, physical, like that. I just love that. So I just wanted to throw that comment in there because I think it's so important. It can get easy to get stuck in one path of, especially if you're super Christian, it can get easy to get stuck in like, all I need is God. But yeah, but like, what about your body? How's your heart doing? How's your mind doing? So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just, you know, the things that people don't associate. So in here, the book is, you know, physical health, headaches, migraines, muscle aches, body aches, breathing difficulties, immune dysfunction. You know, mental health is you can't regulate your emotions, or, you know, can't interpret nonverbal cues, or irrational thinking. And then with emotional health, you disassociate from yourself.
Yeah.
You learn how to be helpless, mood swings, and then even spiritual health. You may have bitterness towards God, you know, may change your belief in it, waiting for God, the higher power, to fix it all. Just like you said, is to fix it all, but he gives us that free will. He wants us to take charge. He wants us to take the reins and be responsible for. And so those are all things that are associated with it. And we typically don't look at that whole body.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I just feel like, man, to anyone who's listening, like not everyone who listens, right, has gone through child loss specifically, but everyone has gone through loss of something. And I think everyone can relate to the topic of and needing to walk through just healing. And so it's just beautiful, like to hear you share from your journey. And I just appreciate hearing it so much. Like I'm very young. I don't have kids of my own. I haven't walked through this, but like just hearing practical steps that you're giving, I'm just like, I think that's something for me to hold on to too. And just as I navigate through just different disappointments and loss in life. So I very much appreciate everything that you shared. And I hope that those listening can grab onto those things too. I'm going to pivot like just slightly from the last question that we sent you, but like, I'll still keep it in there. I'm just curious. One of the things I have asked others is there a mantra, a scripture, something that like, this is the truth that I just live by that helps give you courage, for one. So a mantra, a scripture, whatever it is. And with that, are there other practices that you put into place in your life to help you choose courage each day?
Yeah. You know, God's not done with me. I think that's a huge one. And then also that, God has bigger plans for me. That's in Deuteronomy, and just like, not to despair. And as I lean more into God with my walk, is that he tells me to be courageous. Do not be discouraged. So to be able to lean into God's promises is more and more. And even 2 years ago, I didn't know those promises, and God has so many of them that he's given to us. And even to think that there is eternity. And when I can think about this, those that have gone before me, I'll be reunited with. And that in itself is like, okay. And yeah, when the time comes, I don't want to die and I don't want to leave those around, but then I have that future to look forward to. So the second part of your question, I think I answered the first one, Christy. First part, what's the second part?
Just, are there other practices that you've put into place in your life to help you choose courage every day?
Yeah, really thinking about others and saying, waking up and go, who can I help today? Who can I impact? Because if I keep these tools and resources to myself, I'm being selfish. And so it's amazing how I can tap into my knowledge and experience and share it with others. And, I talked about that elephant in the room. And when I start to talk about it, it is amazing. Oh, I had this happen. I lost a child at at birth, or, I lost a child in an accident, or child had cancer. And it opens it up, just being able to have that conversation and being vulnerable, because I believe people really connect with the fact that I've been through this. And when I speak about it, I open that door and can help others.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I heard a message on Sunday at church, and just the pastor talked about how, like he has to repent of like the fear, but also the fear that says like, I've made this all about me. Like, God, I'm so sorry that I've listened to fear and let fear make it about me. When I think about your story, what you're doing is you're saying, God, like, this isn't about me. Like it is, and you need to heal and you need to grow. And everyone does. Like we need to work on ourselves and the grief and whatever we're walking through. But what you're doing is saying like, God, this isn't about me. And I want to move forward. I want to use this story to help others. And I think that that's absolutely like what we're meant to do in life. So thank you. I could keep talking to you forever. I feel like I have so much that I want to like learn from you, sit under you in. But thank you so much for sharing so much of your story and just the ways that you're walking with others.
Yes, it's been my honor. And as you said, if you want to chat more, you can find me. I think you're going to post my links, my website. Schedule a consultation with me, and we can chat and see how I can help you and make a difference in the way you're moving forward, and that you can live that life of quality. So, I'm known as the grief specialist because I've been through so much. The grief specialist. Seriously.
That's crazy. What a title. Like I can't imagine anyone saying, you know what, I hope someday people know me as the grief specialist. But it's beautiful because of the way that you're using that and letting the Lord use that.
Yeah, thank you. I do feel blessed that I'm able to help others, and so blessed to be able to share this with your audience. And I will just encourage your audience, if this has resonated with you in some form or fashion, listen to it again and share it. And as Kate had said, it's like we don't necessarily have experienced child loss, but these principles apply to grief. And there's so many people that are out there hurting. So share this podcast with those that are in need, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And we will have all of your links below. You can find them right now if you're watching. You can look down, find all the links. yeah, who wouldn't want to sit in a consultation with you just to chat? I would love that. So check that out, everybody. And we will, yeah, like I said, post all those links. Just to wrap up today, I wanted to read a quick quote from Christy's in my book, A Place Called Braverly, which, by the way, if you have not gotten it, you can grab it on our website, a place called braverly.com, or wherever books are sold online. And you can get a free ebook there. So on our website, not wherever books are sold. But I just wanted to read this quote from chapter 3. Christy, I think I keep going back to your chapter because I just love your writing. But this is from one of Christy's chapters. It says, "Yet when fear gains control, I lose sight of the Father because all I can see is everything that's hard, intimidating, and seemingly unmovable. When fear gets a voice, the truth of the Father becomes harder to hear over the lies that fear speaks. You can't. You'll fail. You're not good enough." And so the Father invites us to take courage because he recognizes that fear will wait in the places he's called us to and in the things that he's called us to do. He understands the power of fear shaking us and redirecting our steps. The Father invites us to take hold of courage as we come because it's what we need to stand among the waves. And I think if you listened to this before, I think we've already read part of that quote before. But what I love is that first part, especially as we talk about grief and the fears that can come from just loss that we're walking through when we lose sight of the Father, because of everything that's hard, everything that we're walking through. Fear gets this voice that's so loud, and the Father longs to bring us into that place of love, of belonging, of healing and wholeness. And he longs to give us the courage to take those steps where he's asked us to. So I wanted to leave that with you guys today because we want to share really good ideas. We want to talk to new friends. We also want to call us back to the heart of the Father, to a relationship with him. So I hope you guys enjoyed today. Again, Peggy, thank you so much for joining us. It was a delight to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
So awesome. And we'll see you all next week.